75% of Australia is arid or semi-arid. Drought is frequent and intense. During the summer, temperatures can rise above 50 degrees Celsius in the shade, when there is any shade. Most of the inhabitants live near the coastline, where the climate is not so harsh. The heart of Australia is relatively flat. No mountains will attract the clouds. Rain is infrequent and capricious. Ancient and native flora has adapted to survive in this stressful climate, growing on poor soils and arid land. Animals once imported by the settlers are now wild and are devastating the landscape. Intensive cattle farming destroys the crust of an already dry and fragile soil. The earth has become sterile. Desertification intensifies. The Aboriginals were the first to live from the land and made the most of what nature offered to them. The colonists came with their European farming methods. Today, the Australian soil is depleted. To avoid disaster on this desert continent, everything needs to be rethought. But how and with who? The heart of Australia is the land of 10 deserts. The Great Desert of Victoria, the largest of them all, is as vast as Germany. Wildlife is in crisis. Sandstorms, intense wild bushfires, drought, flash floods, depleted soils. How did this continent country get to where it is today? When the indigenous population arrived 40,000 years ago, the country was covered with thick forests and was far greener than it is today. The Aboriginals lived from hunting and gathering, making do with whatever they found. Every source of protein was an opportunity. The English colonists did not see life in this way. Cook landed on the Australian coast in 1770, and the Crown of England took possession of the continent in 1788. Minerals and gold were discovered. The island seemed promising. Settlers flocked in great numbers and came with a wide variety of fauna that did not exist in Australia. This damaged native plants and wiped out local wildlife. Forests were logged to make place for farming. Disaster was underway.
This area was completely covered by a forest, and farmers would have cleared this forest to grow crops and pastures for the grazing of sheep and cattle. And this land would have originally been some of the most fertile land on the farm. So it would have been the land was cleared first. This was the premium land.
So this would have been one of the best paddocks on the farm, wouldn't it? The house is there.
Yeah, the house is over there. This would have been fresh water, and they would have built here first because it would have been fantastic. This would have been a little paradise. They would have said, let's go here. Here we've got fresh water. This is the place for us.
The colonists that established their homes in this corner of Australia were convinced they were creating a New England, but their dream soon disappeared, eaten by salt.
Yeah.
It's a piece of an old plough that has rusted away. In a funny way, the plough caused the problem of the salinity, and now the salinity is taking the plough. Look at the way it's just rusted, just
Amazing.
completely rusted to pieces.
The salt that killed the farm has contaminated all the southwest region. Scientists estimate 5% of the southern lands of Australia is hit by high levels of salinity. The disaster is irreversible.
That is terrible. That's saltier than seawater. As the soils become more saline, that has a physiological effect on plants, causes a physiological drought.
The water table was once 50 meters deep. Today it is less than a meter from the surface.
Over the 30 or 40 or 50 years after the land was cleared, those water tables started to rise, bringing salt to the soil surface. And as you can see, when that water table gets close to the soil surface, you are having such devastating effects on the landscape that not only are crops no longer possible, but the native vegetation also begins to die out. This has become a desert. It's a saline crust. I think we came in with high expectations of what the landscape would deliver, and the consequences of that agricultural development only became apparent 50, 60 years later, and we're still living with that.
Nothing grows here. The land is abandoned. (2,500 kilometres to the east of Perth, in a zone north of Adelaide, entire villages are also abandoned.
They must have thought they was going to be here for a long time, the amount of work they put into it anyhow.
Farina was founded in 1878 by a group of farmers. 10 years later, it was already a thriving town with a school, a post office, a hospital, a police station, 2 churches, 2 hotels. Even the train came to Farina.
To see such a town, a big town, just disappear is it's just a sight to be seen, isn't it? You've got to see it to believe it. The amount of work that's gone into this town within, you're only talking a sort of 50-year period, isn't it? From building a whole city, small city, like a small town, and then to actually there's no one living here, just a ghost town.
In Farina, only the cemetery is still standing. What happened here?
In this country, they thought the rain was following the plough and it was going to turn into a huge agricultural area, so they were building it ready for when everyone grew the wheat, and it was just going to be probably like America where it did rain and all those towns are still there and are still viable. But here it just stopped raining.
the colonists realized too late that Australia was not America and nor was it England. Here, the rains can fall for a decade and everything is green. Without warning, the rain ceases and the whole region is in a drought that can last for 10 years. The local farmers didn't see it coming to them.
I would like to say that it's not the beginning of the desert, but in the wrong season it is the desert. So when you get those dry years and persistent hot winds, well, it turns into a desert.
Other villages in the region of Farina have come to the same end. In the 1850s, Kanyaka was the home to 70 families. 50,000 sheep grazed the land. All of these settlements were built on the same illusion. The climate is warmer than England, but obeys the same weather cycle.
When things are green, it's just very, very hard to think of it ever being arid. And that's the challenge in these areas, is that fact that it's fluctuating.
A few people had their doubts. Things couldn't be as simple as the settlers believed. In 1865, the government commissioned an English Surveyor General, George Goyder, to map a boundary in southern Australia separating good farming land from ground liable to drought. Goyder travelled over 3,000 kilometres on horseback, questioned the local Aboriginals and farmers, observed plant life, and drew a line that is still known today as Goyder's Line. South of the line, rain is sufficiently regular. North of the line, rain is too unreliable to trust. Farmers did not take the line seriously. Farina and other deserted villages are 300 kilometres from the line drawn by Goyder, in an area where he officially discouraged settlement, the planting of crops and farming.
Ignoring Goyder's advice led to untold hardship for some people. There was this really strong sense of boosterism, that this colony could survive, that we could, by farming methods, by planting trees, we could improve the rainfall. It was an early idea of climate change and human-induced climate change, but humans were going to improve the climate by cultivation and bringing European farming systems to this arid area.
The farmers of Farina and their neighbours were blinded by their pride.
When the people come from England, they found that this country here was easy to clear, a lot easier than further south in the higher rainfall. And people told them, and it was at that stage, we had a number of years that were above average. So they thought that, well, why would they go down there and try and clear massive trees when they could come up here and dig it up with a plough relatively easy? So they sort of got us sucked into a false sense of security.
Over the centuries, the indigenous people have learned the importance of water. For example, they know that this hole in the ground is in reality a natural well, one of many found throughout Australia. Most farmers still use the high productivity agricultural model that spoils the fragile land and wildlife due to the specific Australian climate. The country has become a gigantic producer of fresh meat.
$258 Zincaline, till it's 158 till Dundana, 256.
104 million animals are bred, mainly for export. If we were to take into account the damaged soil caused by today's grazing methods, we would realise that the price to pay for an Australian beefsteak would be exorbitant.
"40 years ago, my idea is that everyone owned not enough country, and the only way they could try and survive is by having a lot of livestock on not enough country, and of course the country was always bare.
Despite the damage of such farming methods, this devastating logic seems unstoppable. In the heart of Australia, herds of cattle are free to roam over thousands of kilometres. Starving animals graze the few plants they come across to the bare ground. Their hooves smash the fragile topsoil. After their visit, the earth is stripped, ready to lift off in the next sandstorm. In these semi-arid zones, the cattle are always on the limit of survival, and despite such vast farming areas, when the drought is set to last, it is still not enough to save them.
You're working in a desert, it's arid, but it's what's underneath the ground that is where allows you to be long-term sustainable in the desert. It's understanding what the root system is doing to this. It looks dead. You know, you have a look at all. There's only a little bit of growth, that one there dead, but they're all in the same stages. This landscape is in good condition. All we need is the rain. That's the secret of it.
Severe drought has hit the country since the turn of the century, and the situation is getting out of control.
We've gone from probably 40 mils in some rain gauges, which is just on 2 inches for the year, and other places have had 4 to 5 inches. So it's just manoeuvring those cattle around where the feed is and making sure you're looking after the landscape for long-term sustainability. You've got to make sure that you're counting what fodder you have and calculating the kilos of animal and what you can run on how many acres you've got.
When heavy and abundant rain returns, Rick Britton won't hesitate to triple his cattle. From a herd of 3,000 heads, it will grow to 9,000. If some ranchers can still juggle with the drought, as difficult as it may be, others have already got both feet stuck in the mud.
This old cow was only 6 years old.
380 cows from his herd died through starvation and thirst.
We're at the end of our wet season, so to speak, or when we're supposed to get our rain, and we haven't seen any yet. Even if it does rain in winter, it won't rain grass.
The farmers of the area are forced to sell their reproductive cows, the key to their breeding program.
We're selling all these female cattle, and they're chopping their heads off and they're grinding them up and they're feeding them to the Americans and to the Chinese in hamburgers. And once a female cow's had her head chopped off, she's not going to breed another calf.
The bitter irony of Richard measures his gloom. For the past 3 years, he has not made a single dollar of profit from his farm. Quite the opposite. Just like all of the other farmers, he is heavily in debt. Richard and neighbouring farmers at Longreach in Queensland are doing what they can to save their cattle by sending them closer to the coast, thousands of kilometres from their ranch. Cows roam along the roadside in search of greener food. Cowboys watch over the herd's rambling as best they can. The herd is under transfusion. Trucks deliver fresh water to the thirsty cows twice daily. Farming methods imported from England have reached their limits.
The writing's on the wall. I just can't keep putting my hand in my pocket. I've got nothing more I can't borrow any more money. I can't keep going on with this.
Longreach was once the capital of cattle and wool. Today, the town is dying. The property market is in despair. The livestock that once packed the stalls for the marketplace have vanished in hot air. Farmers are bankrupt. Banks are seizing their properties, ranches with little or no value.
Men, you know, they get depressed and they're not talking to anyone, and of course, you know what happens. They just think that it's better they're out of it. We're all getting hungry. Everyone's getting hungrier. If it's not for food, it's for money. And it's pretty scary.
Another unexpected curse burdens Australia, a country still paying for the mistakes the colonists made. Camels are not native to Australia, even if the geography and the climate are appropriate for them. Back in the times before tarmac roads, the colonists imported camels from Afghanistan and India. They were used to cart goods across country on dirt tracks. When trucks were introduced, the camels were left to their own fate. They returned to the wild, where their numbers dramatically increased. Over 1 million of them devastate the centre and west of the continent, their numbers doubling every 10 years. Local vegetation is not adapted to the grazing of these imported animals and suffers from their predation. As the drought settles in, the mammals infest pools of spring water, deteriorate and pollute them at prejudice to other species. When dying of thirst, instinct of survival turns them into highly aggressive beasts, entering villages and breaking anything that carries water: toilets, air conditioners, reservoirs, water pumps.
It's a problem that really snuck up on us, and I think the reason for that is that a lot of the camels are out of sight and out of mind, and there wasn't really a strong appreciation of how quickly the population was increasing and by virtue of that, the impacts that they were having, until it really started to happen around human habitation.
Hordes of wild camels became a pest for the remote Aboriginal villages in the heart of the country. Damaged equipment was expensive to replace for these communities with limited resources. The Arid Zone Research Institute was in charge of the problem. In 2010, the government-funded camel culling program came into action. $170,000 camels were shot dead in less than 5 years.
When the animals get to high numbers, something has to be done, because at the end of the day, if you don't, a lot of them die anyway due to thirst and starvation.
The whole of the southwest of Australia is under severe drought, including the coastal zones and the city of Perth, the capital of Western Australia.
The 100-year average runoff into our dams is 350 billion litres per year. Last year we got 11. So it's gone from 350 billion litres to 11 billion litres. That is a phenomenal change in water supply in a very short period of time.
The country has few options. The scarcity of rain has forced them to desalinate seawater, turning it into fresh water. The plant at Binningup supplies drinking water to Perth and the region. Several different techniques can be used to produce drinking water from seawater. The modern Binningup plant uses a method called reverse osmosis. It is reliable and relatively inexpensive. 140,000 cubic meters of fresh water are produced daily.
The desalination plant is like a filter. We have water from the sea coming in, and if you think of a water molecule as the size of a ping pong ball, a salt molecule is the size of a tennis ball. So when that water goes at high pressure through the filter, the water goes through and the salt stays behind.
Perth has a population of over 2 million inhabitants, and the number is forecast to double by 2050. Does this mean more desalination plants will be required to enable citizens to carry on sprinkling their lawn?
More and more people does not mean more and more water. Our population has grown by 1/3 in the last 10 years. Our per capita water use has dropped by 1/3. So the people of Perth use 1/3 less water each than they did 10 years ago. So we have educated the community and worked with the community to never waste water and to understand how precious water is. Our future planning assumes no rain ever again.
Kilometres of pipelines cross Western Australia, bringing drinking water to the population. Desalination plants are accused of burning up precious energy. The authorities say it is the price to pay to stop the whole area from drying up. The Binningup plant is run on clean energy produced by wind turbines that help preserve the environment. At Port Augusta, in southern Australia, a group of investors are exploring another technological possibility to resolve some of the difficulties the country is facing. In this arid landscape lies a pilot research centre with a greenhouse of 2,000 square metres. Growing inside are hundreds of plants that seem oblivious of the outside weather constraints.
We use concentrated solar power, concentrating the sun's thermal energy. We use thermal desalination, basically boiling salt water to make fresh water. And we use a steam turbine to generate electricity.
After a successful 5-year trial period, Sundrop Farms are moving to a new, larger scale. Four giant greenhouses, each covering 5 hectares, are under construction. 880,000 tomato plants will grow here, producing 10% of the country's needs. Water is pumped from the nearby ocean, and solar energy is captured by 23,000 mirrors, individually controlled by GPS for optimum efficiency.
This will be certainly the largest sustainable solar thermal powered agricultural facility in the world.
Drip irrigation, nutritive transfusion, controlled temperature. The tomatoes produced by Sundrop Farms may well be tasty, but it remains highly unlikely that such brilliant technology will be sufficient to feed the whole of the Australian continent. Today, most Australian farmers feel trapped in a cul-de-sac.
About 20% of the landscape has gone saline, so we can't crop it. So we can't put it back to how it was before. And we've been looking for salt-tolerant plants that are nutritious and productive.
99% of agriculture in Australia is based on plants that are brought in from overseas, so foreign plants, very, very few exceptions.
It's time for researchers to return to the deserts and take a closer look at local plant species that have been scorned and neglected for far too long. Some in particular have survived the climate and are food for the wildlife. For the past decade, a group of scientists from various fields of study have collected and tested over 60,000 plants.
If anyone comes to you and says, I have the right plant that will provide a total ration for sheep, they're a liar. There is no such plant. What we are after are combinations of plants, mixtures of plants.
The old man saltbush, known as a Triplex nummularia by scientists, has several qualities the team are looking for.
This plant is a desert plant from the middle of Australia.
A perfect example of how native plants adapt to the continent's severe climate conditions.
We can have them here in 100 millimetres of rainfall, and that doesn't worry them too much. You could say that the rainfall in our agricultural zone is more than these plants are used to. So we're not worried that they'll survive. We know they're going to survive. They're a native plant.
The secret of a Triplex nummularia is hidden in its roots that can plunge 10 metres beneath ground surface in their hunt for water, pushing the water table down whilst lowering salt levels at the surface. To measure the efficiency of the plant on the soil's salinity, the team has planted hundreds of bushes of a Triplex. Their discovery interests local farmers. Growing a Triplex could be a good nutritive food substance, essential for cattle over dry periods.
These shrubs are already adapted to the worst case scenarios that we might expect with climate change in this part of the world.
While a Triplex nummularia brings promising results for the near future, it will not be sufficient to nourish all of Australia's cattle. Even if it could, it is never wise to put all the eggs in one basket. Research on native species continues more intensively than ever. Another native plant interests the farmers. It's called Mitchell grass, a plant whose qualities were already recognized in the mid-19th century by Scottish explorer Thomas Mitchell. Like many local species, it was then ignored and forgotten about. Mitchell grass flourishes on the most difficult and hard-hit soils, especially clay soil.
It's an incredibly tough plant, very well suited to surviving in drought and desert conditions. It's an Australian native that over millions of years has evolved so that it stores energy reserves. These little rhizomes are absolutely full of starch, which allows the plant to actually regrow, even after severe drought. Individual plants can live 30, 35 years, perhaps even longer.
Dr. David Phelps is collecting samples from each field of experimentation.
What we're really interested in knowing is how much seed from the Mitchell grass, which is our preferred native grass, is actually here in the pasture. Once we have an estimate of how much seed is there, we can tell the graziers how well their country should respond once the drought does actually break. And more importantly, how long they need to rest their country before they actually bring cattle or sheep back onto it, because we need to let those seedlings get established and start to grow before there's too much grazing pressure on them.
Scientists are not alone in the quest to improve the land for the breeding of cattle. Farmers are also experimenting with a holistic and empiric approach.
The piece of country that my father had, he didn't believe you could ever eat it out. And he did. He ate it to bare ground. Almost every year cattle died because of lack of nutrition. So you can imagine the disaster that came when it He'd produced a man-made drought. Eventually, nearly everything died.
When Bob's father moved here in 1920, the landscape was green and the soil was fertile. He put too much cattle on the land, and it was the beginning of the end.
This is hard.
Just like concrete.
Just like concrete. Nothing's going to grow in this, is it? Oh.
On a hot day, the surface temperature of that is 60 degrees.
Right.
Plants cannot grow.
No, it's too hot.
Too hot. This piece here was closed down for 25 years with no change.
So
and if you do nothing about that, it will not change. Well, you can see what happens here. The wind, if it's strong enough, will take that off.
Overgrazing has left many large red-hot patches throughout Australia on which nothing will grow.
You have an A, B, C horizon. The A horizon is what plants like. The B horizon contains minerals and stuff, but it doesn't have the organic matter or anything that plants need.
You'll have the minerals, but you won't have anything else. It's missing all those other vital sources, and so you can rip it up with any machine that you like and turn it into a pseudo-looking soil, but it's not going to grow.
You are still ripping a soil that plants don't want to grow on.
And you can put as much water onto it, still nothing will grow.
It's a very poor soil. And people come and they think that you can apply the same approach, the approach that is used in other countries, to Australia. It doesn't work.
Bob inherited the ranch from his father in 1960. At the time, the ranch was in a poor and desperate state. Today, he is convinced it's man's greed that turned the soil into a desert. For over 50 years, with his wife's full support in remote Central Australia, Bob has worked relentlessly, applying scientific research to the field. He has the intention of developing a sustainable land management program. Step by step, with his holistic approach, he pinpoints a 4-point strategy. Step number 1, keep ahead of scientific research and adapt its findings to fieldwork.
We took all the advice that people could give. You must realise that we started from being absolutely broke.
Step number 2, seek and find a nutritious plant that is drought resistant.
We tried 60 species other than the native because the native seed source was gone. And of those 60s, one success, 59 failures.
Step number 3, reduce cattle numbers.
What was the original government stocking rates for this size of property?
3,000.
3,000, and you now have only 1/10 of those now?
We have 300 on that equivalent piece of ground.
Right.
Step number 4, stop fertile topsoil from disappearing. Bob came up with the idea of building banks around the most affected areas to stop the wind from blowing essential topsoil away.
It is creating a new surface to which plants can attach themselves. You are building a new A horizon. You are stopping the loss of topsoil, and that's the result. Whereas out there, that is still losing the topsoil. Well, nobody that I knew did this.
So you can continue having good cattle on areas that were completely lost.
Remember that everything died here once.
Yes, of course.
I had no one to talk to about this. If you're coming up with an idea, there's very few people you can discuss that with because they know you're an idiot. If you show this to people, they say, how many more cattle can we run on that to make more money?
Yes.
And they will come and eat that, strip that off, and next thing they have where they started. They've got to be not greedy.
Thanks to 40 years of intense effort and his curiosity and creativity, Bob has succeeded in re-establishing a natural balance that his father once compromised. He is a free but lonesome soul in a world where greed and profit repeatedly win against ecology. To manage the landscape, the Aboriginals call upon their long-time ally, fire. Local authorities used to condemn their behaviour, judged too dangerous, but today their position has turned. They have understood that traditional patchwork burning comes from good knowledge of the landscape.
We make fires to encourage the growth of food plants, like bush tomatoes. We make fires to encourage the growth of green grass, so that the kangaroos can eat. The country becomes new from the blackened earth.
Controlled patchwork fires are also a good way to reduce the quantity of combustible matter that ignites when lightning strikes, creating devastating fires. Spontaneous and intense bushfires burn out all plant life, whereas traditional burning often spares the active cells. Specialist in the ecology of bushfires, Dr. Robert Boyd has studied patchwork burning as done by Aboriginals. Where fire has not struck, flourishes a desert plant called spinifex.
Spinifex grasslands, they occupy the driest, hottest, most extreme environments in Australia.
To enforce their domination, Dr. Boyd suspects spinifex produces an allelopathic chemical substance, meaning one that poisons or suffocates other plants in the vicinity.
They are able to suppress other plants from growing.
A spinifex can reach the height of 2 meters, a diameter of 5 meters, and their roots have been found as deep as 30 meters below the surface. Their stems can become so hard they can pierce the reservoir of a vehicle, and so dry they can ignite in a flash.
Just below the soil surface, there can be up to 20, 25, 30 even different species of plant existing as seeds, just waiting for the right conditions to happen. When you get a fire come through in these spinifex grasslands, the spinifex grasses are killed, and all of a sudden, there's, the competition is removed, there's nutrients released in the ash into the soil, competition for water is reduced, and when the rains come along, these other plants are able to germinate and grow, and so all of a sudden the desert becomes a garden.
Aboriginals harvest the grassy spinifex seeds to make bush bread. When necessary, they set fire to the plant to free the soils from their suffocating domination.
High-intensity fires cause a lot more soil heating, and seeds of all these plant species that are existing in the soil, under these high-temperature conditions, a high proportion of them are killed off, and there's just no food around for Aboriginal people to eat. So fire and humans really go hand in hand in spinifex landscapes. I think this seed has been cooked by the fire. I think it's dead. The fire was too hot, or this was too close to the surface.
Despite the chaos of a tormented colonial past, the Aboriginals have kept their know-how. It took over a century for the value of their savoir-faire to be recognized. Today, scientists are interested in the knowledge the Aboriginals have acquired by living in the desert for 40 or 50,000 years. In a struggle to better understand their deserts, the Australian government started the Bush Blitz project, a vast wildlife inventory program. It is estimated that 3/4 of the 750,000 species of the continent remain unknown.
We're going to be working in one of the most remote areas of Australia and also one of the most extreme environments in the world. Each team will be issued with a survival kit, satellite phone to take...
An expedition of 20 scientists explore the heart of the Gibson Desert. Their base camp is set up at Kiwikura, the most remote Aboriginal village in Australia, now an Indigenous protected area. The scientists are counting on some of the elder members of the community to help them. Josephine and her family were amongst the last Aboriginal nomads. She remembers the true science of the bush, one that her parents taught her. Survival in the desert may require a healthy body, but it would be impossible to exist without an intimate knowledge of the bush.
So you're just walking and you grab him?
I drag him dinner.
Dinner.
Australia has many different species of lizards, and many remain unknown.
Vent length is 245. So we take a little bit of the tail, for a tissue sample.
Yeah.
This specimen is a blue-tongue lizard, still a juvenile. In the desert, survival can depend on a lizard that you know how to catch. The scientists are also studying entomophagy, or the use of comestible insects as a food source. The Aboriginals eat the larvae of beetles, honey ants, and witchetty grub, which is the larva of a moth.
When it gets a bit dry and so on, and they have trouble finding kangaroos or lizards and so on, they can rely on these. And they are full of protein and some very good fats. Western science recognises one species of witchetty grub, but the Aborigines recognise many, and I suspect there could be a number of species across the central deserts. There could be 20, 30 species.
Working with the Aboriginals it's really it's humbling in a lot of ways, because they know how to survive here. They know how to find food where we think there's no food. We don't see water, they find water. They're resourceful. They're brilliant at tracking animals. This is their land. They're part of it. They know how to live here, and you kind of feel like a child when you come to a place like this and you see how adept they are and how little we know.
During a helicopter flight across the Gibson Desert, the scientific team discovers a lake that is not on any of their geographical maps, nor any satellite image. The whole zone is abundant with life in this unbelievable oasis.
The last thing I expected was to be standing in water in the middle of the desert. Isn't that brilliant? That's brilliant.
This island of plants bubbling with life, set in a landscape scorched by the heat, gives a deep feeling of unreality.
It shows that life persists, even in places that you think are unlivable. It brings you hope. You know, you just have to wait for the rain.
Scientists don't know what impact the desert has on droughts, or what impact the desert has on the massive fires that destroy homes. We don't even know if it's expanding or not. And that's why we're here, to try and find that out, to try and help put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Australia finally recognises that Aboriginals, who know the bush better than anyone, can help rethink life in the immensity of Central Australia. A place the colonists once thought they could master and that today is slipping out of control.